Welcome to the Strategic Insights Podcast. I'm your host today, Andrew Mackel with Strategic Information Group. Today's podcast is going to be a partner spotlight. I'm lucky enough to be hosting today with two of my longer standing partners from the Avalara company. I have Ian Zwit, sales executive, and Christine Martin, senior solutions consultant. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, Andrew. Nice to be on the podcast with you.
That's great. I know you're both in different regions of the country, so I want to thank you for joining today. And I've had the pleasure of, I think, working with Christine for, what are we coming up on 10 years now?
Probably close to 10, yeah.
Yeah, close to 10. Wow, time flies. And Ian, we've had a pretty good tenure so far as well. So, I'm blessed enough to be able to understand what you've done in the industry and how you help support our customers in the ERP space, from our Midwest user groups, Southeast user groups, West Coast user groups, client meetings and so on. But what I want to do is, a lot of people might not know what you do for our space, because a lot of times in my account base, it's the larger customers. So if you could do me a favor and each introduce yourselves and your roles with the company, and then we'll break into what Avalara does for customers.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Again, my name is Ian Zwit, so I'm a sales executive with Avalara. And I meet with companies who are struggling, who have challenges in indirect sales tax, you name it, and just having challenges in the industry, right? So just talk about what their current process is, and just discuss solutions and how we can help.
Thank you, Ian. Christine?
And I'm Christine Martin. I'm a senior solutions consultant here at Avalara. So I actually have a really interesting background when it comes to our space. I spent 20 years in industry at Marriott headquarters, Cable and Wireless, Rock 10, Snyder Communications. And then I made the jump over to the side and joined the Avalara team about 10 years ago. And I get to talk every single day to people that are me. People that are experiencing the exact same things I experienced when I was in industry. So for me, it's great being able to talk to folks and showing them another way to do their jobs that isn't as antiquated as it was when I was back in industry.
Absolutely. I mean, how many times, because I come from industry as well, and that's how I joined the space, but it is a different conversation when people come with problems that you remember vividly that used to cause headaches and long nights, and you come to solve those problems. So it's always a fun conversation to have with people, and you get to geek out, right? It's the things that you know a lot about, a lot about their pain, so it's always fun to have those conversations.
And I kind of age myself sometimes when I talk about being excited when WYSIWYG came out. And anybody that's listening, they'll probably guess about how old I am based on WYSIWYG and being able to use that to bold and highlight things.
Well, we'll have a few people giggling at this point in the podcast. So, to help everybody understand, how Avalara has come to be in your station in the market. Ian, can you give a little background on, what products brought Avalara to where they are today to be, obviously the global gorilla you are in this space in supporting customers?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Avalara really started as a sales tax calculation company, and we still do that, and we do it very well. But obviously, as compliance requirements grew and got more and more complex, we've filled the gaps since then. To truly become an end-to-end compliance solution and partner for these companies. What we've traditionally relied on, our core product, so to speak, would be obviously our AvaTax, which is a sales tax calculation engine, and our managed return service for sales tax returns and our exemption certificate solution. The AvaTax portion of our business, it's, again, when you start, nobody thought about this five years ago, right? And now all of a sudden this is getting dumped into somebody's lap. Like sales tax isn't fun. Trying to find out rates and taxability of products and services, it's not fun. It's complex. Typically, when I talk to these companies, somebody drew the short straw, and like I said, it's fallen in somebody's lap. They're by no means an expert in sales tax, right? So for us, for AvaTax, if you're selling to an end user, you need an accurate sales tax calculation, and rather than using zip codes, which are not accurate for sales tax calculation, or scouring the internet or state websites to find rates. So Avalara uses geolocation, rooftop rate calculations to get specific sales tax rates on a specific invoice. And depending on what you sell, it's not just a rate conversation; it's a product or service taxability question. So depending on what you sell, each state may handle each state may handle the taxability of the products and services completely different, which only adds to the complexity of what you're doing. So it's not just finding the exact rate, but it's also figuring out the taxability of what you sell to ultimately provide a good experience to your customers and of course keep auditors happy.
I imagine that has to be one that lucky person, as we like to say, that gets that dumped in their lap. That has to be a horribly manual process and probably takes an abundance of time for your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you think about it, if you're in, a state or two, okay, and especially if it's your home state, it might not be as painful as these companies that are growing and expanding and their tax profiles expanding, and all of a sudden you go from 2 states to 5 to 10 to 15 and on up. I mean, it's virtually impossible to do that manually and to do it accurately, right? So when we look at and the same goes for doing your sales tax returns, so generating those, remitting, you filing and remitting, it's extremely complex. It's extremely time consuming. As Christine said, it's just an antiquated process that, there's a better way to do it now. So, and then I think about, one of our other core products that's widely used and critical to compliance, especially in this space, is our exemption certificate management solution. Exemption certificates, similar to the complexity of the rate conversation, each, they present their own challenges really, but each state has their own forms, right? Their own, what should be on them, the format that they should be using. So when I'm meeting with these customers, like, we don't have the resources. We don't have, the expertise to know what should be on these forms, how they should be filled out. They're just thankful that they're collecting them, and most likely storing them in some type of file cabinet or a shared PDF drive and really never looking at them again. So, we're taking a mundane process that is complete, guesswork in most cases, and just creating a more efficient process around exemption certificate management, and ultimately reducing risk for the company, right? So our software is automating the collection, the validation, the storing, and the maintaining of these certificates to get folks back to generating or revenue generating activities and not focused on sales tax, right?
So I imagine both those activities are horribly labor intensive, but they come with a great amount of risk due to possibly getting audited. It sounds like that would be a primary
absolutely.
risk concern to the client.
Absolutely. So that AvaTax conversation, selling to an end user, getting a sales tax rate, this is the other side of it. So if you're selling to a reseller or manufacturing something, a component of something that will be in somebody else's product, you're not going to charge sales tax for those for those type of transactions. So in order to prove to an auditor of why you didn't charge sales tax, you have to have a valid exemption certificate. And again, it's a pretty painful manual process in trying to get those certificates correct. And then also, if you think about it, so everybody looks at it from the standpoint of risk and audits in their own company, in their own process. What we've really started to do with our software is really look at the other side of it. So the buyer experience, right? You don't want to be painful to buy from. So we're really taking enhancing the buyer experience, making a much better customer experience throughout the buying process. And then also as the life of that customer goes on, if there is an easier way for them to do something, to be able to purchase or provide something that's needed, it can certainly, it's a win-win, right?
Right. So you made a couple good points there. So it sounds like Avalara gives you competitive advantage to the customer because obviously it takes away risk. It makes it easy to buy from. There's a lot of nuances there. Because of that, and you also said, of course, a lot of companies don't have the bandwidth to support this type of labor-intensive work. What size companies do you generally get into? Like, what's a typical Avalara account per vertical, if you will, knowing full well that you're taking risk off the table, you're taking people's time off the table, and post pandemic world that we're living in now, we all know that resources are scarce.
Yeah, and I think that's what's pretty unique to Avalara space. Like our software, we really have numerous solutions that are related to indirect tax and compliance, and really it's for all industries, right? So when you think about the size of businesses, we have from Fortune 500 companies down to literally mom and pop shops that are okay. All of a sudden, we're growing fast. We don't really know how to handle this, and we're have expanding tax profiles and they need help, right? So these challenges exist in every size company. They might just be a little bit bigger challenges in some cases for the larger companies. But to your point, in the SMB world, that's kind of the perfect size customer for us, where it's like, okay, these companies have grown to a point now where their manual processes just aren't working anymore. Right? It's not scalable to continue to grow. And that's the goal of majority of these companies we talk with is to increase sales, to sell somewhere that they haven't sold before. Well, those are great, but it also presents new challenges along the way. But really the software can work within the framework of any type or size of business. The challenges just might be a little bit bigger of what we're solving.
So it just comes down to when that expansion happens. Christine, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, can I jump in for a second and expand a little bit more on what Ian was talking about? And I think Wayfair really made a change for companies. So the small mom and pop company that only needed to charge tax in their home state, Wayfair changed it for them. And now they've got this requirement to collect tax all across the country. Oh my gosh, how do you do that? How do you know how your products are taxed all across the country? How do you know what certificates to get all across the country? So Wayfair really made a change in how companies do business, how these smaller companies are doing business, and all of those regulations and requirements for those small companies as well. So while we talk an awful lot about these big companies that we work with, it's these smaller companies that maybe need more help because they don't have the staff to do all the taxability research, manage all of those exemptions. And what we've done is given a tool that integrates everything. We're going to tell you if, hey, you're approaching this Nexus status, you should probably register, which, by the way, we can help you with those registrations. Hey, you've got these exemption certificates that are going to expire. We're going to help you with those exemption certificates. But we've also taken these exemption certificates and integrated them into the tax calculation engine. So making this complex, burdensome task of sales tax calculation, remittance, whatever that may be, we've made it easier for smaller companies all the way up to, like Ian said, a Fortune 500 company.
That's awesome. I just didn't realize how much the direct to consumer or how many of those corrugated boxes that lay on my front porch due to Wayfair, Amazon, Etsy, wherever, can probably have impact on the fact of driving small companies to look at Avalara for a solution. We have a couple good things in there regarding the base product and how you're helping companies in the SMB space up to very large companies, and Wayfair's, of course, impact on the business. But my question to you is, we're talking about what you're solving. Give us a little bit of background on Avalara. What ERPs do you work with? Because obviously a lot of times your product's tied into an enterprise resource planning tool or a finance tool if a company's small enough and they're doing more of a distribution model. Are you guys agnostic? Do you only work with certain players? What does that look like in your space?
Yeah. So Avalara is very partner focused, and we have to live where these invoices are taking place. So Avalara has over 17 integration partners, in whether that's ERP systems, e-com platforms, accounting platforms, you name it. Right? We have to live where these invoices are taking place, where sales tax needs to be captured. So we are not we are not tied to a specific ERP or a specific space, and that's what's so great about the software is it can be utilized across the board in several different industries, and really solve the problem for as we were talking about earlier, the business owner who's doing it all on his own, or these other folks with larger finance departments and much bigger tax profiles. So the ERPs and the ecom platforms typically, obviously we have to have an integration with them, but our net and range for these integrations is very wide, and we are constantly adding new partners as well. So that's never going to slow down in the future. Again, living where these transactions take place is what we have to do in order to reach our goals.
And let me piggyback on that a little bit here for you too, because we've seen businesses change, right? It used to be that maybe a manufacturer just sold to distributors. Now we're seeing that these manufacturers are now going direct to consumers. So it's no longer just an ERP that they need an integration for. Now they're selling online, and they've got to have an e-commerce integration. So just the nature of business changing on how people go to market, how they sell to consumers, has caused us to change as well. We no longer, we started with an ERP integration, but we quickly saw that there was this need in the e-commerce world. So like Ian said, we have over 1,000 integrations that are already pre-built. So if there's somebody that's in the QAD space, but they also sell through e-com, they need to be able to do the same calculation in two different places. You don't want to have one tax rate and one taxability in e-commerce, and then a whole other tax rate and taxability that you have to manage within QAD itself or whatever platform. So what we've done is given this agnostic tool to be able to do the same calculation, giving the same rates, rules, all of that stuff, no matter where a company is doing business.
Yeah, and to what Christine's saying, obviously we sell software, but a lot of my job, especially in these initial calls, is really just kind of taking a consultative approach to discuss what that looks like. I was just meeting with a company who is using QAD. To Christine's point, they are traditionally manufactured. Well, now they're going to start selling something specifically directly to customers. And they had no idea what that entailed. They had no idea how that looked, what they would have to do, what the requirements were on the e-com side to truly be compliant. How those transactions needed to be filed and remitted, right? So it's really taking the current processes, ask what their goals are, have that conversation to truly be an advocate for their business and help them understand, here's how this has changed. Here's what you're going to need to do. Here's what this looks like. And they're like, okay, yeah, we need to go back and meet a few more times before we probably roll this out and truly understand, what we have to do.
I'll be honest, from my side of the house, because obviously I lead in and I introduce you to a lot of customers that are having these types of challenges. It's probably the most new common thing is the direct to consumer, right? Or they adding into a different e-com platform due to the fact they're taking products they normally sold through a distributor or a wholesale, and now are offering a tweaked product or a different product they're selling direct to home. And due to like you said, Wayfair and Amazon, I think the world is changing, and we're going to see more and more of these one-off. All of a sudden, I've got a brainchild business idea, and they think it's going to be very simple and straightforward, and there's this tax implication that they're going to have to start managing on multiple levels, and it's good. I'm hopefully this podcast will give them the right direction on who to reach out to when they decide to take over that new part of that market space. So obviously you guys are agnostic when it comes to ERP and platforms and partnerships, which is awesome. Globally, is there any part of the world you're not working in? Obviously, I know you're specifically in North America with what I work with you on. Is there any part of your product that has limitations, or are you guys a true global partner?
While we talk an awful lot about the United States, Avalara is an international company. We have a cross-border solution. So think about anytime you ship something overseas, there is this code, it's called an HS code, that has to be applied so that when your package gets to another country, the border people know what it is. They know the duties that need to be applied. That's a really hard thing to do. And these HS codes vary country by country. So typically there's like a whole group of people that would do this, that look at this. And Avalara, in our effort to be a part of every transaction, we started HS code classification through an acquisition. But that HS code classification also leads to the calculation of duties. So while we've got the VAT calculations that are possible, we also have the duty piece, which then leads you to that HS code classification because they all work together, right? So internationally, we cover the world, not just from a VAT calculation, but also from these other pieces that are part of doing business internationally as well.
Absolutely. I did a short stint in the UK, and I remember the amount of duties from different countries and geos we were working with, and it was a little bit mind-boggling because things got a little more expensive if you weren't quite used to what the actual end costs were going to be.
So let's talk real quick about the customer side of things. Somebody's going to buy something online and they think, oh, I'm going to pay $20.99. But when it gets to them, there's all of these duties that have to be paid. That just makes for a horrible customer experience, right?
Absolutely.
So again, backing things up to being a part of a transaction, why not show your customers upfront, this is how much it's really going to cost you, this total cost of this product if I'm shipping it to Germany or France or the UK or wherever that may be. That's really where we're trying to add some value to our customers so that they've got a better experience.
Oh, absolutely. The partnership and the buying experience, right? I've bought things and prices have gone significantly up due to the cost of shipping it in. So, I mean, knowing that ahead of time can definitely make you a customer for life. Now, Christine, I want to focus on you a little bit. Like I said, give me a little bit. What's expanding in Avalara? What's new? What's the direction? What your part is in solutions? What's new on the horizon?
Well, we've got an awful lot of stuff that's happened over the last 4 to 5 years. One, we had our exemption certificate management solution. Great solution. We have expanded that to now it's not just getting certificates from customers. We also recognize the need to manage the certificates that are being issued to vendors. So I'll call it an enhancement to our exemption certificate tool. Through some acquisitions, we've added Avalara license management. So imagine having to manage all of your business licenses when they renew. If you've got storefronts, maybe there's sprinkler licenses that you need or fire extinguishers that need to be renewed. All of those things can be managed within our license management solution. And I can give you so many scenarios about the licenses that need to be managed. Imagine having an HVAC company. Every single one of your technicians that are out there needs a refrigeration license. They may need specific plumbing licenses, electrical licenses, all of those things that then also have to be renewed. How do you keep track of all of that? And that's where our license management came into play. We also acquired a company called TTR. We have renamed it since, Avalara Tax Research. And this to me was my dream. Back in the day when I was at Marriott headquarters, I had those old books with the onion skin paper. And when I was doing some research, when I was looking up things based on an audit, I would have to go to these books and look through the books and refer to something else. Avalara Tax Research makes it easy. If you've got a question, how is this new product that I'm going to be selling, how is this going to be taxed? Instead of going to those books in the library and flipping through the onion papers, I can simply open up a website and do some research. And I'll give you a great example. One of the companies that I worked for, our executives came to me and said, Christine, we want to buy a new plane. Where is the best place for us to put this jet? And I spent 2 weeks researching a certain distance from our home office to figure out how the tax should be applied. It would have been really nice to be able to have a tool like Avalara Tax Research to just go in, look up the taxability of jets for those jurisdictions that I was looking at, to find what the cost was going to be and to make my recommendation quicker than 2 weeks. But I may also have some questions about the taxability of things used in manufacturing. I mean, the company that I worked for at that time was also a paper manufacturer. And trying to understand where the manufacturing process began and end so that I knew this forklift that we were buying, was it in the manufacturing process or was it just warehouse material? Having a tool to be able to research that and even ask questions of our attorneys of the taxability of those things is huge. So we've added this tax research tool to our coffer of products, if you will. And then we've added a few others as well. Recently, we've acquired property tax. So think about all of the property tax returns that need to be filed. Maybe you're a restaurant. Maybe you've got distribution facilities all across the country. The property tax is a real pain to manage. So we've acquired that to give our customers more help to do their jobs quicker, faster, more efficient. We've also acquired a 1099 solution. So think about all of the influencers that you may have. Those influencers are getting paid cash or they're getting products. They may need a 1099 at the end of the year. And I will tell you that managing the 1099 process, validating taxpayer ID numbers, issuing or responding to B notices, all of those things is time consuming. So again, what we're trying to do is make people's jobs easier. We've also added excise tax around fuel, communications. I mean, I spent time in the telecommunications world, and telecommunication taxes kind of dwarf all of these sales taxes that we're talking about. And then we also have a hospitality. Think about how big like the Airbnbs and the VRBOs of the world have come, and all of the lodging taxes associated with those as well. So we've added all of those to our coffer really to help our customers be more efficient, do their jobs more accurately and more efficiently.
That is a
That's a
That's a suite
mouthful,
of
isn't
products.
it?
That's a mouthful. For me, I never realized that when a customer is debating on doing growth by greenfield sites and by acquisitions, how much your product could support them. Like you said, with figuring out location, property tax, expansion, forklifts, if they're going to acquire and build a greenfield site, what's all those implication tax wise for building in North Carolina versus South Carolina, right? So there's some serious strategic planning capabilities that Avalara is bringing to the table on top of your, the base product, as you will, that's gotten you to this point in the game.
Exactly. And, we're trying to be very strategic. Our CEO has said for years that he wants to be a part of every single transaction in the world. And if you look at our acquisitions and how we've expanded our offering, not just in our core product where we've added functionality to our core product, but expanding it from sales tax to excise tax to lodging tax to communication taxes to 1099 income tax related into property tax. Really, we're trying to get to this, and he calls it our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal, trying to get to be a part of every transaction to help companies.
Oh, that's awesome. You said that with a straight face.
I did.
We hear it a lot. So.
I know, but we're even laughing behind the studio on that one. That's awesome. There's not much you don't cover, right? So if you talk about, the interesting thing to me as I sit back and think about this, if you think of like private equity, venture capital, when you talk about owning multiple companies and multiple verticals, not only do you cover like the basis, now you're talking about, VRBOs, you're talking different tax. You're covering companies that own multiple industries, multiple, when they diversify, you're able to touch and support pretty much every avenue of their business, at least, at this level of thinking, where you add some real value strategically when you're going after that. I can't even repeat it, but when you're going after that big monster, there's a lot there you can offer in that consultative approach to supporting their business.
And you are spot on with that. I mean, we think about how can we help our customers, and as customers expand, and we're seeing this an awful lot after the pandemic, right? Companies that weren't necessarily prepared for a pandemic are being acquired. So do you want to have to integrate a whole new tax engine because the one that you had only works with one ERP or one shopping cart? We want to be able to help all of our customers in every aspect, whether it's shopping carts, e-commerce, multiple ERPs. We want to be able to give them that continuity, the same tax rates, the same taxability, the same exemption management that impacts the tax calculation, and then the returns piece of it too. I mean, imagine acquiring a company and now you've got a whole other set of tax returns that you've got to do. That's a lot of work. I've been there. It's a lot of work. So having all of this information come to a single place is really just mind-boggling. From where I started many moons ago, where we had Excel files and we were transferring, literally hand transcribing numbers onto tax returns. This is such an automated euphoria, if you will.
Well, and Andrew, if you think about the people that are, the companies that are doing it manually, if Susie in accounting is doing it manually and she retires or leaves or something happens, no one understands where everything is, where it's saved, what needs to be done, right? So implementing Avalara creates a repeatable process. So anybody can step in and utilize the software to, as Christine was saying, whether it's an acquisition or, something happens with an employee and somebody else has to take over that job. You're off and running with our software versus trying to, comb through the weeds of a manual process to try to understand what she was doing and where she was filing and all those things. So it's a very repeatable process, which is, kind of is peace of mind for, for higher level management and understanding that things are going to be done correctly on a go forward basis, regardless of what happens with staff, downsizing, of course, all these things that are, layoffs. I mean, you name it, right? Anything can happen. So it's a very repeatable and scalable solution, to Christine's point.
Yeah, no, I when I hear that, the carnal knowledge walking out the door is a problem for every part of industry, right? And the risk you have when you're talking about what these people manage is huge. Now, the interesting part to me is, as you said, acquisition earlier, Christine, and you're going and you have to do two sets of books. A lot of times when you acquire a certain size company, you're running two different systems for the foreseeable 6 months to a year, right? So your ability to work with that other system, even if it's not the system they're going to keep long term, to not have to do all of that manually is huge in the acquisition process and that migration step as well.
Absolutely. So you can integrate into this new company that you've just acquired, but once they finally migrate over to the main system that every company is going to use within that ecosystem, then again, it's just changing that integration. It's still the same engine, still giving the exact same answers. And I want to talk a little bit more about some exemption piece, because all of this conversation has been upfront, these tax calculations, right? How do we do the tax calculation? How do we do the returns? But sometimes I think we forget about what happens later down the road. An auditor comes in and says, hey, I need to see all of these exemption certificates. When I was in industry, I had a room full of binders. Everybody had their own way of filing these things. I would walk in that room, and to be honest, I was super overwhelmed. So I would just call the customers and say, hey, can you send me another exemption certificate? The auditor's here. We've given somebody a tool now to make that part of their job easier. I used to have an auditor wait for weeks for all of these exemption certificates. I can just email them a zip file now of all of those certificates, which to me, again, is another one of those mind-boggling things, because I spent so much time looking for exemption certificates. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
The folders upon folders.
Yeah.
No, it's a great point, right? It's the risk avoidance, the streamlining of process, and let's be honest, no one wants auditors hanging around longer than they have to for any part of your business. So the faster you can get them the details for them to do their calculations and get out, the better off everybody is. Just stress level alone. Yeah, I probably would have had hair still in operations if I had these automated tools.
Yeah, you and me both.
Right. It's exactly what happens. Well, listen, we're coming up on a good amount of time here, and I think we can set up a secondary one of these meetings in the future, and talk, possibly even bring a customer in and do a case study. I always like to wrap up these podcasts with a good close on either a case, customer testimonial, a case study. But I'm actually your CEO's drive and that terminology is almost the one I think the buzzword we have to end on. Being part of every transaction. So I'm going to ask you to say it one more time because I can't do it. And then we'll look to connect at a Midwest user group or one of the other user groups that we belong to for any of the products that we represent. Please come by, talk to the folks at Strategic or Avalara, and we would love to learn more about your business and of course, have discussions on how we can streamline that. But I'm going to ask you, Christine, one more time, the direction of the company for every transaction. What's the terminology again?
It's a BHAG, now I can't even say it. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal.
Big, hairy, audacious goal. And on that note, I will thank you both, Ian and Christine, for being on the podcast today. And we'll be talking to you again soon.